Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and you're listening to The Business of Content, a podcast about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. Today, we're talking to the owner of Digg.com about how he aims to bring back the site to its former glory. In the mid-2000s, Digg was one of the most powerful websites on the internet. Powered by its army of users, the platform would send gargantuan amounts of server-crushing traffic to any content featured on its front page. Millions of people visited it each day, and it turned its founder, Kevin Rose, into an internet celebrity. But you probably know what came next. A misguided redesign triggered a user revolt, and its audience abandoned it for Reddit and other platforms. Before long, it seemed destined to follow in the footsteps of Myspace and Friendster. Its story didn't end there. In 2012, the site sold to the startup studio Betaworks, which immediately went about trying to revive the Digg brand. In 2018, it was purchased by a company called BuySellAds. I recently interviewed Todd Garland, Digg's new owner and CEO. We discussed its current editorial operations, its monetization strategy, and its plans to restore Digg to its former glory. Before we jump into the interview, I have a question for you. Would you want to read a case study on how a blogger created an ebook bundle that generated $70,000 in sales over a 3-day period? How about a case study on how to expand your podcast audience by creating article versions of your episodes? Or what about a case study on how a writer drastically grew his newsletter audience by licensing out his articles to mainstream publishers? To access these case studies, you need to become a paying subscriber to my Substack. By subscribing, you'll get these case studies in your inbox each week, but you'll also be supporting the work I do for this podcast you're listening to right now. That's right, the only way to support the production of this podcast is by becoming a subscriber. To subscribe, go to simonowens.substack.com. That's simonowens.substack.com. Now on to my interview with Todd. Hey Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So your background is in ad tech, right? Like, how did you get into that field?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into it. I had a couple websites where I was selling ads on a sponsorship basis, and I didn't really enjoy the process of having to negotiate with the advertiser, send invoices, put the ads up, take the ads down. That wasn't my main, the thing I wanted to do on the web. And so I built a system that would allow me to do that hands-free and basically just click a button when I wanted to approve a sponsor.
And so that was BuySellAds. That's the company the ad tech company that you run.
Yes, it's the most creative name I could come up with for what we do. Yeah.
And so you're trying to make it as self-service as possible. Is that, am I understanding that's how you kind of felt like you could make it a better user experience?
Yeah. So rewind the tape back 12 years. That is what it was then. Over the years, it's evolved a bit and become far more hands-on from a sales perspective, and just making sure that advertisers are making good decisions and putting their ads in the right places. That being said, we do that with a very small team, and so we have a lot of automation in all the things that we do. But by and large, yep, that's exactly right.
And how many platforms, publishers are carrying your ad tech on their platforms?
Yeah, so about 1,500 individual websites right now.
So that's really, you have like a lot of massive reach and scale from the sounds of it.
Yeah, our kind of shtick, if you will, is we don't discriminate on the size of the website. We just care about the quality of the content. And so, it could be something as small as, let's say there's a developer at Twitter who has a blog. He writes one post a month that gets 10,000 page views, all the way up to something like Dribble, which has, tens of millions of page views. We can play as small or as large, basically. Just depends on the quality of the content.
So the reason I'm having you on this podcast is because of your decision to buy and run Digg. Before we talk about the decision to buy Digg, I was hoping we could I'm guessing most of my listeners are pretty familiar with it, but I wanted to briefly just go through the history. It started as a social links site founded by this guy, Kevin Rose. And where everything was kind of like a user generated, and the most popular links were upvoted, or in this case, it was called digged to the front page. It's sort of similar to Reddit. And then Digg made some, what many people considered strategic mistakes, and they lost a lot of their users. And then it was bought by this company called Betaworks, and they operated Digg kind of like a curated news page with paid editors actually choosing what's on the homepage. Is that kind of like, am I getting that history pretty much right?
You are, yeah.
Yeah. So you decided to purchase it a few years ago. Can you talk me through kind of leading up through the sale itself? Like, what made you decide that it would be a fit with what you were already doing? Like, was there some kind of perceived synergy between what Digg was doing and what your company was doing, or was this a completely different product category for you?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it was completely new for us. Like, we did not really have much experience in anything editorial. We were really just trying to pair advertisers with relevant audiences so that the ads didn't upset or annoy the users on the websites we sold ads for. Digg is one of those sites that we assisted with their ad sales. And so we knew the audience, but we had no idea how to actually run that business, to be candid. And so, what we did know, however, was that, like I'm a little bit older in terms of internet years. So like I remember, trying to get to the homepage of Digg. And I remember those days where it kind of felt like the wild, wild west on the web. And I still felt as though there's something really special about Digg, despite it not being what it once was. And just really wanted the challenge of trying to figure out how to, take it to its next phase of life, not necessarily to like a retirement home or something like that, but see if it could, make another trip to Vegas or something like that, if you will.
What did you think was still special about Digg? Like, what was still left over from that it's kind of glory time? Did you feel like?
Yeah, a ton of passionate users. So even today, like I'll speak to people, and somehow Digg will come up and they'll say, "No way, you run Digg," and it's like, "Well, yes." And they'll say, "I love that site," So I think there is still a very solid, passionate base of users that are very loyal, return to the site multiple times per day, per week, etc. And they're also different from like many of the other sites that you might visit every day on the internet. They seem to have a knack for unearthing stories that you don't find elsewhere in many cases, and trying to help tell the story of the internet from a slightly different perspective, or like a more curious perspective than you get elsewhere.
And so I've seen over the years, like sometimes ad tech companies will kind of dabble with like actually buying or creating their own publishers to see if
Mm-hmm.
there's some synergy there, where if they can control the content and the ad side, that they can create like a really great user experience and generate a lot of revenue. Say Media, it was one example that really tried to get into publishing for a little while. Was there anything there where you were thinking, okay, this would be like a test ground for maybe merging my advertising tech with an actual publisher and seeing if maybe you could improve some kind of the user experience, the advertising experience, create some kind of synergy in that way?
Well, I mean, I think if we look back at all those examples of companies like BuySellAds trying to do that, I'm not sure how many success stories we're going to find. So that part of it is a little daunting. I mean, like countless examples, right? There's Myspace. I have nothing bad to say about Say Media, and I don't know any of the specifics there, but I haven't heard much about that and what they've been doing there. Um, and others. I probably shouldn't name them because I don't want to start any fights on the internet. It's a
Uh-huh.
dangerous game these days. But like, I think one thing that we had experienced at BuySellAds since the beginning was we would work very, very hard to bring quality advertisers, sponsors to a website. We'd work with that publisher to build up their revenue, and then many of them would sell. And that was very frustrating for us because as soon as that sale event happened, we knew exactly what would happen next. They would rip out all the high quality ads where the publishers were willing to sacrifice a little bit of revenue in exchange for having that better experience. And next thing you know, there's like 17 ads from the ad exchanges on the website, totally destroying the user experience. And, that's one thing that we said from the beginning with Digg that has remained true. We have not polluted the site with additional ads, or littered it with 17 ads below the fold, or stuffed a bunch of video ads in there. So I feel as though there is another story in parallel between Digg and BSA that we're in the process of trying to discover how to actually bring to life. And that's just the overarching idea that like it's been really hard to publish on the web. And maybe that sounds silly, right? There's all these great tools like WordPress, I know you had an interview earlier with Ghost with John and Olin. There's a ton of great tools for people to publish on the web, but like there's all these things they have to put together in order to be successful. They need to be able to run, an email list through Campaign Monitor or MailChimp or any of the other options. If you're getting into lead gen as a publisher, which is a lucrative way to monetize an audience, you need a CRM and like some lead nurturing software. You'll have Google Analytics or some other kind of analytics software. You'll have a blog such as like WordPress or Ghost or something like that, or maybe something you built yourself. And so you're putting together like, and obviously you'll have some kind of monetization. So you'll be working with like BuySellAds or AdSense or any of the other number of ad providers out there. And what I found interesting about that is that, someone who's really good at building an audience, writing, who has something to say, like, why should we also expect them to be really good at figuring out how to squish together all those different tools to create a great user experience? And so with Digg, that was also one of the things that we were hoping to do differently, that we hadn't seen done with others who had tried in the past and bringing publishers into the fold. And so that's kind of like the path that we're on now, is trying to figure out how to, essentially give people who can build an audience, build a community, who love to write, a better set of tools to turn it into a living instead of just like a hobby.
That's interesting. So I actually have some more questions about that, but I'll get to that in a moment. Digg obviously used to be mostly user driven in the sense that they were submitting the links and upvoting them. But it's now still mostly human curated, right? Do you have like an editorial team?
We do. So we have an editorial team of 5, and they're basically manually curating that homepage every single day.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about the workflow of that. Like, is it basically they have their, bookmark links and they're just going out and looking for stuff, or is there some kind of codified way that they're going about trying to find content before it really blows up? What's kind of the editorial ethos of that team?
Yeah. Admittedly, I am probably not the best person to speak to that, in the sense that like I stay out of the editorial process. And that was one of the deals we made with the edit team up front when we did the deal, was that we weren't going to have influence over how they're managing the front page. And so we kept those, business units completely separate. That being said, we basically aim to hire people of the internet. And what I mean by that is people who are in tune with kind of the how the heartbeat of the internet, how content does bubble up and become viral. And while Digg's purpose isn't necessarily to like showcase all the viral content of the web, we try and find the things that are most interesting that should get more attention, that our audience, when we position those stories in our voice, gives them more legs to run and better distribution, essentially.
And how much is Digg producing on a daily basis? Like, or is it like 12 posts a day, 100 posts a day? Like, what kind of output is there?
Yeah, about 150 to 200 per day.
Wow. Yeah.
And then we have a daily email, and we'll filter that down to like about 12 in the daily email.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Like, is most of the use centered on the website, or are users interacting with it in other ways? Like, is it also a huge part of it the newsletter? Talk about like the different ways that users are interacting with Digg on a daily basis.
Yeah, so a ton of direct visits to the homepage, and a lot of interaction on the email. So it basically comes from both directions. The split is about 60-40 if we're looking at just email and just direct interaction. So the majority coming from the email every morning.
And so it's a morning email. Like, what's the goal of the email? Like you said, it's only a handful of links versus the 100 plus on the website a day. Like, it's in the morning? Is it trying to get people ready for the day, or is it just trying to be kind of like, okay, here's like the first entertaining thing you can open? Like, what's its goal? I know that you're not on the editorial side, so you can't speak 100% to it, but like, what's the goal with the newsletter?
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, the goal is to get people to the site, basically. So we'll mix in stories that we have on the site as well as stories that link directly out elsewhere. And it's, kind of like a daily pulse. Like instead of waking up and checking Twitter and trying to sort through, 500 tweets since you went to sleep. And let's be real, all of us have a little bit of an addiction. It's to give you that like short and sweet version of some interesting things to start your day first thing in the morning.
And then you are trying to be kind of like a homepage for a lot of people. Like sometimes I'll be at waste 5 minutes and I'll go to the homepage of YouTube or Reddit or something like that. You want that to be kind of the goal for a lot of your users, is like whenever they have 5 minutes to spare and just want to look at stuff on the internet, that their automatic thing that they're typing into their browser is digg.com. Like, is that kind of like the goal?
Yeah, exactly. And listen, like I know that a lot of other properties try to be this for people. And we just try to take a slightly, Digg-like approach to it with stuff you won't find elsewhere. And additionally, we do believe that having a web component is very important for reasons just like you said. Like when you do need a break from, life, just hey, what's on Digg right now? Because it will typically always be fresh, every hour or so, which is a little bit different from a lot of sites similar to ours that are email only.
And talk about like what you're doing with the social media account. So like you curate a lot of news. Like you'll have a bunch of like articles from the Washington Post and Vox and stuff like that on the homepage. Let's say there's like a tweet to that Vox article. Is it going directly to that Vox article, or is it going to the Digg post that's aggregating that Vox article? Like, what are you doing from a social media perspective?
Yeah, so as a user, I don't always want to have to essentially get through like a visit paywall, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And we will more often than not send someone directly to the article on another site. At certain times for certain articles, we do write a summary. So let's say something that's been covered by Vox, Washington Post, and 3 other sites. We might round up a quick summary of that and send someone through Digg that then sends them to a post on those properties specifically, but typically it's direct to site. Facebook as well, we do the same thing.
A few years ago, Digg, I think this was before you bought it, Digg was experimenting with some original content. Like they had some deal with like the podcast Reply All, where they were
Yes.
taking their episodes and converting them into their audio episodes and converting them into articles. Is Digg really doing much in terms of original content now with its editorial team?
So when we first started with Digg, we did have an original content program, and very similar to other companies like Medium, I know did this recently, as well as some of the other unfortunate stories we've had in the media business over the last few weeks. It's really hard to actually make that kind of a business work. So I think the economics were, you'd spend between $2,000 and $3,000 paying someone to write the posts, which they deserve. It was a lot of work to write these posts. You spend another $500 on some illustrations, but at the end of the day, like there was no way to actually make that economically viable. I know even recently I heard rumors of Medium, who used to pay people, I believe $250 per post, was now going to like an all I don't know if it's called rev share in their world, but like quote unquote rev share model. It's hard, like like the internet's pretty competitive these days. The kinds of content that make money, unfortunately aren't the kinds of content that are, the long form piece that a lot of people love. And I think that's one of the major struggles of the internet. Like if we were looking at, 2020 over the next decade, like where the internet goes from here, I think that is going to be one of the major struggles that we have to figure out how to make work for everybody.
Who would you say is the Digg reader? Like when you're looking at kind of like the demographics?
Yeah. So, and this is just straight demographics. This isn't who I want necessarily, quote unquote, want the Digg reader to be. This is what it is. So there's no marketing spin here. It is a middle-aged man living either in California, New York, or somewhere in in Boston or some East Coast big city. Literally, that's it. Someone who is, and by middle age, I mean like between 40 and 55. It's like people who knew Digg when it first happened that stayed with Digg. So I think one of the challenges that we have is figuring out how to broaden that audience, essentially.
Interesting. And Digg used to be able to send gargantuan amounts of traffic to websites. Like I remember my blog back in like 2006 made it to the front page once, and it received 10,000 hits in a single hour. How big of a traffic driver is it today? Like are publishers really noticing whenever they make it to the front page of Digg?
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely have publications that frequently reach out with good stuff and try and give us like a little bit of a head start on it, so they can get, even though it's not what the Dig bump used to be, some meaningful amount of traffic. The top stories on the page in a day, they can generate 2 to 3,000 visits.
Mm-hmm. And so you're saying like just in the same way, like I used to be at a major magazine and they were sending pitches to Drudge all the time, like just like emailing them when links were going up. I know publishers today have relationships with like Apple News where they're sending their editorial team to let them to try to lobby them to feature some article. You're saying that your editorial team also has some of that communication with editors who are trying to promote new content that's coming out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just in being in media in general, a lot of these folks develop really good friendships over the years. And so this kind of outreach happens naturally from, in many cases.
Uh-huh. So the reason I think I reached out to you in the first place, I forget how we got connected, but I saw that Digg seems to be testing out some kind of user-generated content, allowing users to publish their own blog posts to the platform. It kind of looked like Medium to me. What's the plan there? Is that just something you're testing, or is that something you're trying to roll out at large?
Yeah, so I would consider it one of the experiments we're doing to figure out how to drive more growth with Digg. And basically, the gist of it is that we're in the process of opening up a way for people to write and contribute articles directly on Digg in the same way that you would contribute to something like Medium. Not that we think we're magically going to become a better medium, but we feel as though there is room and space for an alternative to people who currently publish on Medium or who currently publish on their own blog. Number one, we can help bring a different audience to them. I know with Medium that it really is the main driver. It's like you want exposure, and so that's why you bring something to Medium. We also believe that there's a better way to monetize than what Medium is doing. We don't think they really gave integrating advertising as a meaningful way to monetize content a fair shake. It was kind of like a half-hearted attempt, as best we could tell from the outside. And we still believe, naturally through BuySellAds, that monetization is like the lowest friction way for somebody to make money on the web. Maybe it's not like the most money that they need to make for what they're doing, but it should be some portion of the pie. So there's that angle. And another angle is, another media company we'd worked with over the years at BuySellAds, Pando Daily, who we also recently purchased, and it was a kind of like a story we'd seen like time and time again. So the idea that someone building a business like Pando Daily needs to pay a team of developers, a team of 4 or 5 developers to build this, what's essentially like, from a software perspective, a blog, even, on top of something like WordPress, like you need developer talent to like do what you want to do. We believe that more of those kinds of publications would have been more successful if they weren't spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineering talent. And, obviously I can't speak for all engineers, but like, I don't think many engineers really enjoy working on WordPress or like, building a blog. It's been done before. Like they want more interesting challenges. And so our secondary goal with Digg is in building a platform that would allow someone like a Pando Daily, who's great at building an audience, great at building a community, writing, etc., to have like a kind of business in a box. So it would not be Digg branding; it would be their own branding, but it would essentially be powered by the Digg platform. It's very early for that right now. We are in the process of building it right alongside the ability to contribute content to Digg because it's the same editor. But that's also part of the vision. Like, can we get a better, version of, what's essentially like community management software out there into the wild?
So you build the publishing platform on Digg, perfect it, and then white label it or outsource it, or not, outsourcing is the wrong word. Maybe white label it for participating companies that want to have a similar publishing platform without having to build one from scratch. It sounds like kind of like what the Washington Post is doing with Arc, what Vox is doing with Chorus, that kind of thing.
100%. And, I don't think that people should have to figure out how to, integrate Campaign Monitor or MailChimp into their WordPress site or their blog or whatever. So trying to solve all of those technology problems in one place for them. And, maybe it's something that eventually they'll grow out of and they'll want to solve some of those problems directly. But until then, something that has everything built in the box. And obviously the motivation from the BuySellAds side is that, we believe in doing tasteful monetization on the web, and that's something that is that will similarly be bundled in with that, so that we can make it either free or pretty cheap.
In the more near term for Digg, like in terms of the publishing, is it something you want to open to the masses, or is it something that you want to make invite only, or are you just not even there yet?
So we're trying to decide that basically before the end of next week. We have some rudimentary moderation tools in place. And it's not like we think all of a sudden the entire web is going to come and start writing on the Digg platform. But we just want to be careful and cautious in how we roll this out. Because I think there's a lot of tough decisions that, platforms have to make these days. I mean, just last week there was like an executive order about, whether, publishers like Facebook and Twitter should be responsible for some of the things that are on their site. So, we're trying to be careful is what I'd say. And so we don't have it all figured out yet.
I was scrolling through your homepage and I noticed that you have what look like some native ads and affiliate links on the homepage. Like, tell me how that works in terms of your monetization strategy.
Yeah, sure. So those are all served from the BuySellAds ad server. And basically all that is a JSON endpoint that we, integrate directly into the flow within Digg so that it looks and feels similar to the existing user experience. The BuySellAds sales team sells into those units, and we have someone dedicated to managing what we call commerce, which is all the affiliate stuff you see integrated. And that's basically us trying to do the same thing that we're doing on the Digg homepage for products that we can monetize through affiliate.
So there's not really like an editorial team. Like it's kind of like a kind of plug and play, just in the same way that like I can buy a Facebook promoted post without interacting with that, nobody on Facebook having to help me craft the post. I can write the post myself, different stuff like that.
Well, so for those units, that does go through like a what I call a sales process, not to make it sound like more than it needs to be, but we make sure that those are written in a Digg voice.
Mm-hmm. And so then for the affiliate links, you're getting kind of like the model is you're getting a cut of whatever sales that are made through people clicking on that link.
Exactly.
But I saw there's actual Digg store at the Digg domain where people can buy some kind of, it's at least the store itself is branded as Digg. Is that a form of drop shipping, or are you guys like basically operating your own kind of e-commerce site?
Yeah, so that's a third-party provider who does that. And, like, I don't want to say anything bad, but like, I don't always love the quality of the products that are sold through there. So that's definitely something we're trying to improve for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you're not like developing your own products or choosing them. It's just kind of, that's something that's somewhat kind of out of your hands that you're just kind of bringing in third party.
Exactly. Yep. It's plug and play.
So what are your future ambitions for the site? Like what is something that you would like to be doing a few years from now that you're not doing today? Like you kind of talked about this former glory of Digg and almost seem to talk like it would never be what it once was in terms of like this dominating force on the internet. Do you ever want it to be that again? And how do you think you could get there if so?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're actively trying to come up with a way to bring it back there. We believe that building a community on the web is still kind of in need of like people like having a clean slate, like there's already somebody moderating, r slash, Bitcoin, or r slash, marketing, or whatever. So a lot of those spaces are already taken, and we think there still exists an opportunity to provide people a fresh place to build a community on the web. And it's natural for these communities to kind of splinter and then respawn elsewhere. And so we're trying to take advantage of that thesis in terms of bringing growth back to Digg. But ultimately, like for me, I still kind of, admire what Digg first was, and almost like take this as like a personal challenge to see if we can bring it back to, its former glory. Not that it needs to look and work exactly the same, but like, I think Digg still has a great brand. It's, iconic in internet web culture. And it deserves, an honest chance to, not chance, but an honest fight to figure out if we can bring it back to, its former glory, for sure.
Would you like to see it one day kind of return to a user-generated content focused company where a lot of the users are driving the content itself, kind of like a Reddit today?
Yeah, and we're experimenting with this right now on digg.com/Bitcoin. That's managed by someone who has a popular podcast in the Bitcoin space, and then he recruited a couple other people who help curate the links, and then people can go in and submit links directly as well. So it probably right now today looks like a poor man's version of Digg version 1, 2, or 3, but we're starting to iterate and basically try and build tools so someone like that who's good at building a community, or take like a Reddit moderator who's worked and built up their subreddit to hundreds of thousands of users into something that can actually become a business. That's our goal, is figure out how to make this so good that we can pay Marty basically a salary essentially from RevShare by him managing this namespace, is what we call it.
And how successful has he been, the Bitcoin podcaster, in terms of like getting people to start contributing to the forum?
Yeah, I mean, we have right now 4. And these numbers are going to sound small because it's super new. We have 4 regular people who submit links, which is great, actually. Like, I don't think we're really ready for higher volume in terms of filtering out all the stuff that can get submitted in an open way like this. And we're getting good content. We're seeing good interaction there. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's like we're off to the races by any means, but we're starting to get some things in place that will allow us to build from there and see what we can do.
Okay, Todd. Well, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find your work online?
Yeah, so on Twitter, I'm at Toddo, Toddo, and everything ends up there in some way, shape, or form. Digg.com, BuySellAds.com, and Twitter.com/@Toddo.
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me.
Great. Thanks, Simon.
Okay, thanks for joining us. I'm actually on the lookout for new guests for this podcast, so if you do interesting stuff in digital content, whether you're a full-time YouTuber, a media executive, or run a cool niche newsletter, definitely reach out. My email address is simonowens@gmail.com. Okay, see you next week.